What I'd like to do today is talk about Unit 4, Unit 4A in fact, on the cell membrane. This will be the structure and function of the cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane. Plasma membrane or the cell membrane is this small little purple layer that goes all the way around the cell, and it's going to control everything that goes in, everything that comes out, and actually let these cells reach an equilibrium, or what's called homeostasis. This is a highly magnified image of the cell membrane, and you can sort of see it's a double layer. It's called a phospholipid bilayer. So you see you've got two layers, and this is going to end up being that phospholipid head or phospho head, and then the lipid tails down here. This one being a water-loving layer, the extra and the intracellular fluid being mostly water, and then the tails inside are going to be the hydrophobic. They're going to stay away from water as best they possibly can. So, cell membrane, plasma membrane, this is the boundary to the cell. It controls whatever enters and leaves the cell, and again it's letting the cell reach homeostasis. If it needs water, water comes in. If it needs salt, salt goes in. If it doesn't need salt, salt gets pumped out. And it is selectively permeable, so it's only going to let certain things in passively, and then actively, if we need to fight it against the concentration gradient, we'll actually use ATP produced by mitochondria, these little double membraned, binary fissioned, self-contained DNA, which we talked about in Unit 3. Some things can pass through the cell membrane, other things cannot. Okay, this is an animation of what's called a fluid mosaic model. Fluid mosaic model means that this thing is fluid. It moves, it changes shape, and because it's got an aqueous solution on the outside and an aqueous solution on the inside, it actually moves. This is a protein that's got a lipid marker on the outside. This is actually a marker protein, but I'm going to push play and you can see how this thing moves. And notice these phospholipids don't have to pay any attention to each other. They can be pretty much anywhere in there that they want. Play it again. Proteins can move. So it is a very fluid mosaic made up of a whole bunch of different things, model of a cell membrane. Fluid mosaic model describes the motion. It's the makeup and the motion of animal cells primarily. Plant cells have that cell wall on the outside, which eliminates some of the motion, although it will move. And cells reside in a very watery solution, extracellular and intracellular. So we've got a cytoskeleton on the inside. This is probably one of those fibers or microfibers, which are going to actually help keep the cell's shape. And you can see we've got the phospholipids, which are these colored, crazy tailed things. We've got proteins that are sticking into it. Got cholesterol, these little match head looking things. We've got glycophosphates, which are actually these little things that are popping up. They're fats that stick up. And then we have carbohydrates which sticking out of it as well. So it's talking about how this thing moves. It's the fluid mosaic model. Phospholipid, this is the phosphate. It sits on top of two lipid tails. There's a saturated tail and an unsaturated tail. It has to do with the bonding of hydrogen going around it. If it's missing a hydrogen, it can double bond the carbon, and that actually puts a kink in it. This is the phospholipid, hydrophilic, hydrophobic. Hydrophilic, hydrophobic, hydro meaning water, philic like love, and phobic meaning like afraid. So this is the water-loving side, and it actually seeks out aqueous fluids, whether it be extracellular or intracellular. These phosphate heads, that's where they want to be. And hydrophobic, that's the water-fearing. It's repelled by water, and that's why these tails tend to stay toward the center, and the loving side on the outside and the hating side or the afraid side on the inside. And there's a little cartoon talking about water and fat. Can't be seen together. Why? Because I'm fat. And then they both start laughing. Transport proteins. These are actually embedded into that phospholipid bilayer, and these are going to allow materials to go through it that normally can't fit through things. So this is a protein that helps transport molecules from high concentration to low concentration that are simply too large for simple diffusion. So this is going to be a passive transport that requires no energy whatsoever, and it happens anytime there's more on one side than the other. They're going to try to reach equilibrium. And water is a good example of this, although water doesn't need to have these transport proteins. They can fit right between these phospholipids. Marker proteins. That's these things that are actually sitting up. There's a protein with a fat sticking up out of the top, and these guys are just basically saying, I'm supposed to be here, I belong to you. It's not a seek and destroy thing. So marker proteins are like a label on a cell. They allow other cells to identify it. All your body's cells have markers, so that we can actually identify them as part of your body, or things that come into your body invade would not have these markers, and they would be identified as not you, and you would hunt them out and hopefully try to kill them. You can see again, here's that cytoskeleton. These are microfilaments that are sitting in there. You can see the proteins are holding on to it. We've got things that are moving along the side. These are transport as well as support. They're held together. It's actually a quite complex system for something that almost nobody talks about, but it's a fairly important part of the cell. Receptor proteins, exactly what it says. They've got a site here that's actually going to be shaped for a certain material, almost like enzymes. It receives chemicals and signals from other cells right on this binding site, and what that'll do is it'll actually cause this protein to have a reaction down inside the cell, which will kick off some sort of other reaction. There are the markers, again, in that glycoprotein with the fat sticking out. We'll talk about the cholesterol in a second. There's that phospholipid bilayer, water-loving, water-afraiding sections of it, philic and phobic. Then we got cholesterol actually inside that phospholipid layer, and you remember these guys were dancing around and moving. These tend to actually kind of slow them out. They help firm up the whole cell membrane, so it's not too fluid. And it also, in certain sections of this, it becomes less permeable, so that small molecules that dissolve in water can't get through it as well. Here's a picture of cell membrane. I showed you this picture. Here's another picture where we've got proteins that go through, integral proteins. We've got proteins that have channels through them, channel proteins. We've got peripheral proteins that only are on one side. We've got those glycoproteins with the markers sticking out the top. And then we have the cytoskeleton underneath where they can grab onto it. So there's that phospholipid molecule, phospholipid bilayer, hydrophilic heads, hydrophobic tails. That's the cell membrane. And here's the site that you can actually create your own cell membrane. I'm going to let you take a look at that. It takes a few minutes to go through, and I'd really like to get through this section. And I think that actually is it for the section. That is 4A, where we're talking about structure and function of a cell membrane. Thank you much for stopping by.